Welcome to KFAS podcast. It's a pleasure having you here. It's a pleasure to be with Professor Amin Khaleil from Argonne National Lab. Professor Khaleil, it's a pleasure having you here. It's really an honor having you in Kuwait. We talked a little bit on the phone on our online meeting, and it was really exciting to learn a lot of things about you, about your career, how it moved from Morocco to France, and then to Japan. And then there was an intermediate step, which I learned about when I looked you up in Wikipedia, but we can talk about it during our conversation. Then you moved at the end to the United States. I know that you probably would like to talk in English, sure. But نبتدي. السلام عليكم.
السلام عليكم.
Okay. مرحبا.
الله يحفظك.
Okay, great. So I understand because of you have to speak in your dialect, in the Moroccan dialect, so it might be a little difficult.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Moroccan dialect has at least 4 languages embedded in it. So, of course, mostly Arabic, but there is Berber, there is French, and there is Spanish. So it is maybe the most difficult dialect within the Middle East to know, to understand. So this may be better for me to speak in English.
Sure.
I apologize for that.
No problem. So I understand that you arrived to Kuwait today.
Yes, this morning. Yeah.
In the morning.
Yes.
Okay. So what is your impression of your visit so far?
So I didn't have chance to visit Kuwait, but I interacted with good people from Kuwait. I'm very impressed with them. So I look forward to my 3 days here and to enjoy meeting people and interacting with students tomorrow in the university when I give my talk. And of course, this will not be the last one. I'll be definitely coming back. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And may I ask you, how did you hear about Kuwait, and how did that get initiated? Can you tell us a little bit about the prize and how you heard about it? And
I think about the prize, someone I don't remember contacted me about it, and it's very specific for Arabic and people, I guess. And he encouraged me to apply. So I did. And I was very surprised, actually, that for the first time I won it. So I was very thrilled because this is a prize that is from an Arabic country. I do have quite a bit of prize, but mostly international. Yeah. I think the last one was the Global Energy Prize that was given to me in Moscow. But this one is special because it comes from an Arabic country. So it was very, very special. Yeah. So this is how I heard about it, I think. Yeah.
So one of the things we'd like to touch on in this conversation is maybe your upbringing in Morocco, where you were born, and what is your journey, your scientific journey. Sure. How did it begin, and how did you become so interested in doing science? So please, if you can tell us about it.
So first let me just introduce myself. You didn't introduce me, but so I'm actually working at Argonne National Lab as the manager, let's see, of the Advanced Battery Technology Program. I also have another hat, which is a joint appointment as a distinguished professor at the University of Chicago. And I have been an adjunct professor in many universities across the world, I would say, in China, in Korea, in Saudi Arabia, which is close, Dammam, actually, and in Morocco. Is a new university called UM6P that I started being an adjunct professor until recently, and also Stanford. Yeah. So this gives me a nice opportunity to meet a lot of different people from different countries. Yeah. So to come back to where I start, I was born in a small city near Casablanca called Ben Ahmed. And I was fortunate to be born to a family of educator. My father was a professor, and later he became the head of a high school. So the how to say, the education is so important for him. So, and fortunately, I was very excellent in schooling. So I excel in pretty much all the different disciplines: math, physics, chemistry. But the one that attracted me more is chemistry. So I took that path, and so I end up. We do have in Morocco baccalaureate, which is after the high school. There is a combined, an exam for everybody across the country. So I did very well in that exam, and it gave me that opportunity to go to France under a fellowship from the Moroccan government, and later on from the French government as well. So to give you the path where I am now, I would say after my PhD, I did a lot of work on intercalation chemistry and also on carbon chemistry, on superconducting, on fluorine chemistry, which later on I will explain to you that it was very good to have all these disciplines. But the intercalation chemistry and carbon is something that has a relationship with batteries now. So the anode used in lithium-ion battery is carbon, graphite. Intercalation is basically intercalate lithium in graphite. So, but the impact on my career was when I moved to Japan. I was a visiting scholar there, and I came in 1990. And 2 years later, Sony come up with the first lithium-ion battery. I was in 1992. And that was transformational because most of the battery, used before that was lead-acid battery that was invented 100 years ago. So it was a little incremental improvement. And then nickel-cadmium battery, which is also 1 volt, very low voltage, low energy. But also cadmium is toxic and carcinogenous, so it's been banned in Europe. And the other chemistry is nickel metal hydride battery, which is very expensive because it uses rare earth, so having a new chemistry that come out that has 4 times the voltage of the best chemistry before, it actually was very revolutionary, how to say. So I jump on it, and I start working on the chemistry. The battery is very versatile. There are many different systems, different voltage. It was very exciting, and I was very fortunate to invent 2 years later the 5-volt system. So that could open up. It created a lot of noise because it opened up an opportunity of even going higher. But unfortunately, there was no electrolyte that can handle that voltage. So that's the reason why that material did not see the life in application. But it put me in the map as the first person to invent this 5-volt. So I was invited and that's how I get into US. I was invited by Argonne National Lab, especially a very dear friend of mine who used to be the director of the energy storage program. He needed someone to build the technology because it's being born in Japan, but many countries want to set in hand on it. So I was invited to, as a group leader, to set up a national program for mostly funded by the Department of Energy, with the aim to develop the next generation lithium-ion for enabling mass electrification of vehicles. And that's started 27 years ago. And as I told you, this technology is versatile, so we work on it and help several companies in US to move some of the technology. And so this way and now I'm working on the next generation, which is beyond lithium-ion in my team now. Yeah.
When we talked during our online meeting, you mentioned something which was fascinating to me about your PhD and the way you were independent during that time, and you happened to stumble upon a discovery, basically using very strong acid.
Yes,
I remember
yes,
that
yes.
vividly. And then you mentioned about how many publications that you made. So can you please elaborate?
So I would say that was, to be honest with you, when I joined the National Lab, I have a very nice mentor, and so he was really a good mentor. So the topics was to intercalate metal fluorides in graphite or in carbon, mostly graphite. But unfortunately, most of the material that are gas phase, which are hexafluorides, were intercalated in Berkeley by Neil Bartley, famous professor. And the beauty about this material is when you put, for example, this metal fluoride, the color of the material change from black to different colors. And the properties change. And some of them has some very unique application because they could be thermal resistive, it could be high conductive, and so on. So in my case, I was asked to intercalate low metal transition, but they're all powder. They are not gas, so it was difficult. So put it in a reactor, you heat it up with some fluorine gas, but nothing happened. So for almost 4 months, nothing. I was almost want to quit my PhD because, and I knew that I cannot be successful because of there is no way to make a powder gas, you know. So I come up with the idea of using, if we cannot do it using gas phase, we can do it in liquid phase. And unfortunately, most of the metal fluoride, they cannot dissolve in weak acid or in aqueous or non-aqueous, solvents. The only way you can do that is through anhydrous HF, hydrofluoric acid. This one is extremely dangerous because one drop, you put it on a stainless steel, it will go through it.
Do they call it piranha or something?
Yeah,
is that what they call?
Yeah.
There is an acid that they name piranha or something, as in,
it's called anhydrous HF, basically.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Yeah. So I had to first to convince our technician because, we are in fluorine chemistry lab, so everything is dangerous. Fluorine gas is also dangerous. So to convince him to help me set up a new setup, because with fluorine and HF you cannot use stainless steel tubes, you have to use Teflon. So you have a weak point between the tube and then the connections. So you have to be very careful about condensing. It's an HF, it's a gas also. Condensing that gas to liquid. So cannot use liquid nitrogen because you can condense a lot and then you have an explosion. So we come up with ethanol with dry ice to condense the right. And because of that, the technician was an interesting guy, so I was able to gain his trust, and eventually we were allowed to do that experiment, and we were able to make many materials, all the metal fluoride, low transition metal that can dissolve in HF, were able to do that, and we end up with many materials and thus many publications. So I was able actually to finish my PhD very early. It took me less than 20 months actually.
And with 15, you said, publications?
Yes,
or
we
something?
Publish a lot also.
Around 15, is that right?
Yeah, basically one material, one publication.
Yeah.
Because they have different how to say it, physical, chemical, thermopower properties and all that stuff. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if you haven't told me about this, but I looked it up in Wikipedia. I found out that you did a postdoc at Catholic University of Leuven.
Yes, I
did. They call it Leuven, right?
Yeah, Louvain. You call it Louvain-la-Neuve.
There are two.
Yeah, there are two. The oldest one is Leuven.
Yeah.
That one is in the Dutch area.
Yes.
The Louvain-la-Neuve is in the French area.
I know.
So I was actually invited because
The French one?
The French one.
Okay.
There is a physics lab in Louvain-la-Neuve. We've seen some of my papers and were contacted by the director to bring those samples so they can do the physical properties, the thermopower, conductivity, and so on. So I brought with me all this material, and then we did the lab experiment and published together as well there before I went to Japan.
Yeah, and then you stayed in Japan for 10 years.
About 9 years. Yes. Yeah. So initially I went in as a visiting scholar at Kyoto University. It's like a postdoc. I'm still very young, and so I work on batteries, primary batteries mostly. Primary batteries is not an intercalation; it's a reaction. So you have carbon and fluorine called CFN, and those primary batteries end up being applied in like batteries for watches, or because they don't have a lot of demand for energy, and that's before the 1992 when Sony come up with the lithium-ion.
Okay.
And so the battery work that I did after Sony, I moved to Osaka National Research Institute. I submitted a proposal to the IST, which run the national lab there, and I was able to get funding, and I continue working on developing the technology. And when we moved to a company called Japan Storage Battery, I was invited by the president to head up the R&D, the Fundamental Technology Lab, because GS is a great engineering school, but they mostly license.
What is GS? Sorry.
GS is Japan Storage Battery. It was actually the company that make the prismatic cells first to make the cell phone very thin.
Okay.
Yeah. So and there I was able to invent the 5-volt system. Okay.
We also talked a little bit before about, I asked you many questions, including, let's say we want to power a car. Why wouldn't we put, those batteries, car batteries, and we just put so many of them in a car?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't it work? So,
first of all, the batteries in the car now is very low energy. It's lead acid battery.
Yes.
So they have very low energy. So if you really want to use the same energy as lithium ion, and lead acid battery is about 40 watt-hour per kg. Lithium ion now is 300 watt-hour per kg. So you can imagine you need already the lithium ion technology is basically the whole chassis of the car. Yeah. If you look at Tesla, underneath the car is full of batteries. So, and this is a technology that has 6 times more energy than lead acid battery. So if you really want to use lead acid battery, you have to fill all the car with batteries and maybe put some on the top of it, which is practical. Obviously, you cannot do that because it become extremely heavy, and you don't have seat for people to sit or to store their stuff in the trunk. So it's impossible.
So with it, let's make it in context. So lead acid batteries, the ones that are now around 40, you said?
40 50 watt-hour per kg.
Watt-hour, which is, energy per kilogram.
Yeah.
So that means it's kind of a measurement for energy density,
yes.
right?
So the
energy density is something very important in batteries, right? It's one of the criteria.
Especially volumetric energy density. You have to have a small battery that be contained without compromising the storage tank or the seating of the vehicle. So energy basically is the capacity, how much electrons you can draw out of the battery times voltage. Now the problem with the lead acid battery is 1 volt. So that's the reason why the energy is low, and density of the materials that are used. So obviously advanced lithium-ion battery now is at 300, which is allow you now to drive 800 kilometer between charge. The lead acid battery as a matter of fact, the electric vehicle is not new. It's been I think there was Ford very likely, or some other companies in the US that come up with this like 100 years ago, but they use lead acid battery and they drive 20 kilometers. So it's impractical. That's why it didn't fly. And then the discovery of oil come in, and then the effort to continue working on electrification of vehicles stop, because it become you cannot beat the energy of coming out of the oil.
So I play golf. So the golf cart, is it right now the technology? I believe it's lead acid because you open it still kind of lead acid.
Yeah, the old golf cart is just for small distance. For 30, 40 kilometers, you can easily do that and then charge it again and do it again. Yes, but lithium ion, some of them now they use lithium ion as well. So you don't have to charge every day. You can charge once a week if you are doing if you're using a golf cart. Yeah.
Big difference, isn't it?
Yeah. Energy is very important because you can make things more powerful, energetic, yet smaller, Or if you want to go long distance, you make it a little bigger and go more distances if you want. So you just need to have the driving force of all the development on battery now is more energy because it can allow you to lower the cost, And of course, sustainability, because when you have mass electrification, that has to be sustainable, which means material inside that battery has to be abundant and cheap.
Okay. Can you also touch on some environmental issues? Because we talked about it and I challenged you a little bit because, I'm a scientist, so I, always challenge any idea, And basically, there is a lot of talk about, cars powered by batteries, that they are better for the environment. But the counter argument would be that you still need to produce electricity to power those cars. So what is the argument from your side as far as the using of electrified cars?
Yeah, it's a good point. So the difference is in the case of conventional cars, you have no control. They are always everywhere, As a matter of fact, 85% of the oil is used for, driving cars. And so they are everywhere, and you cannot capture that energy, that I would say it's CO2 emission from these cars. However, if you have to set up a plant to charge, you can basically is localized. So you can, first of all, there is a lot of effort to use green energy like from solar or wind. There is tremendous amount of investment going on. That's one thing, but it may be not enough. Maybe there might be an opportunity of making nuclear energy as well. Some countries like China and others, they're thinking of that because they are the largest producer of electric vehicle. But if you decide to use diesel or coal, then it's going to be localized. You can capture it. You see the difference, something you can't capture versus something you can capture. And that's maybe the difference between, trying to use any energy to support the electrification, but you're going to do it in a very localized way to have that energy ready. And you can sequestrate or store that, greenhouse gases that is formed using diesel or coal, whatever. That's the only difference at the moment. So that's why there is a lot of research for sequestration of CO2, for instance, or basically storing it deep in the underground, for instance. There's a lot of work going on because they realize that eventually when we have a complete transition to electric vehicle, not only electric vehicle, even, the use of AI, for instance, I just read the report, Microsoft and Google, they spend trillions of watt-hour of energy to power all these processors that they use for AI. So, and imagine this is just the beginning. Maybe the energy there will be even more than for electric vehicle, So, or if you have, for example, batteries for grid, which are gigawatt hour. So we need to make that transition, obviously. I mean, it's very important.
On energy density, which is important. So basically lead acid batteries, the ones that are used in conventional cars, they will not cut it because they don't have enough energy density.
Yes.
So what is the other criteria? What are the other criteria that you need to satisfy in order for a battery to make it into the market. Can you touch on that?
Oh, yeah. So I think there are several barriers. The first barrier, of course, you have to have a battery that works. Like for electric vehicle, it has to have high energy. It has to have long cycle life, thousands of cycles, so you can cycle it at least for a duration of 15 years. It has to have a calendar life. The calendar life is the life of the battery, not only during operation. If you store, for example, your car in a desert, the temperature is very high. The temperature can activate reactions that can actually, degrade the battery performance. So all of this has to be met. The calendar life, the cycle life, and the safety. It has to pass the safety, all the safety requirements. There are several safety requirements that need to be passed before you can certify that the battery can go in an electric vehicle. But the biggest barrier is cost, because people will not buy a car, a sedan that costs $150,000. So the cost is very important if you want to move away from conventional vehicles to electric vehicle. And the target, I think the cost now is about $140 a kilowatt hour. So for 100 kilowatt hour battery, we need $14,000. Yeah, but this is a battery that will give you maybe 1,000 kilometers. It's very big. Most of the batteries that are used, like in Tesla, is like 80, 70. And the near term, by 2025, 26, the prediction is to go to 100. So you drop by almost 40%. But by 2030, at least the target by the U.S. government, especially USABC, which is a consortium between the major U.S. car manufacturer and the Department of Energy. And so it's about 70. If you get to $70 per kilowatt hour, you achieve the cost parity between conventional vehicle and electric vehicle. Mm-hmm. And that will be the beginning of the end of conventional cars, because you have a choice between the two. They have the same mileage. Maybe electric vehicle have even more mileage. And if you add the regulation from government, then it's a lost cause for conventional car, obviously. But you have to get to that $70, $75 per kilowatt hour, which is not that far. You just need to increase the energy a little further.
You said $140 per kilowatt hour. Does that include government incentive into the picture, no?
No. But government incentive is not going to stay forever. The incentive is for like the first 200,000 car, and that's it. So the Inflation Reduction Act legislation, they went a little further. So they give about $7,500 per new car, but also they give some incentive for used car. So to make sure that people, if they want to change, I think it's about $4,000 or $4,500, I'm not sure, for used car. Yeah. So it is good to stimulate the interest, but at the end, you're not going to have the government incentive in this forever. So the number I gave you is the price at the pack level. Mm-hmm. of the battery pack as a whole. Yeah.
You talked to me a little bit again about countries which are really congested, like China, for example, and they really need to curb the CO2 emissions in their cities. So they have some creative ways, including ways to get people to buy electric cars rather than conventional. So you can touch on that.
China, I have to be honest with you, is a strong competitor to the US, but they are actually the leading country when it comes to electrification. They have way more cars produced. Almost 80% or 70% of all electric vehicles are produced in China at the moment. And their way of they also have an incentive, financial incentive for their cars, but China, especially in the big cities like Beijing or Shanghai, you have to wait. If you want to buy a car, you have to go to a lottery. And if you are lucky, after 4 years, then the cost of the plate is very expensive. It varies between $10,000 to $15,000. We pay only $180 for the registration of the plate every year. For the first, if you want to buy a car, you have to pay that much money. Mm-hmm. And then, they set up this regulation where you can drive only in odd days or in even days. So if your immatriculation is, the last number is ended with an odd, then you go on Monday, or the next day you go on Wednesday. So it becomes much more difficult for people. However, for electric vehicle, you don't need to go to a lottery. You can buy it anytime you want. You don't have to pay any registration fee, that $10,000, $15,000. And you can drive it the whole week, 24/7. So those are very powerful incentive that we don't have in the Western world. And that's the reason why the expansion of electrification and then if you add in the financial incentive as well, it become obviously no-brainer. Mm-hmm. And the battery is a major component in the electric vehicle. You don't have an engine, you don't have a transmission, but the battery is major. It's basically the heart of the vehicle. And China has actually developed technology to make the battery cheaper. I heard that BYD can produce now an electric vehicle for $20,000. And so it's become actually very threatening because, nobody in US or in Germany or in Europe can make a battery at $20,000 without incentives. And so that's maybe the reason why the US has put in 100% tariff on electric vehicle coming from China. And the European also did same, but 34 or 35%. So to protect actually the local industry, rightly so. Yeah.
There was, it's interesting, I'll touch on that because one of the things that I know about are, solar. And I know that, China, because of their system, their political system and, the way they do things, they can't control, and for example, photovoltaic cells, they can't control, and they can control the prices, and therefore they drove a lot of countries out of business in solar.
Yes.
So it's interesting that probably
doing the same with
would you think
now.
that they are doing the same thing even
battery,
for
not only that, but the other things that China do is they give a lot of incentive to companies, not only the central government but the local government. So so because of that, it's not a fair game, obviously. So it's very, very difficult for Western companies to compete with China. Not only the government is pushing this very, very strongly, because I remember every time I used to go to China, I would say the climate there is very polluted. Okay. It's like India, But now if you go to Beijing or Shanghai, which are the biggest city, the sky is very clear. So they invest a lot in renewable and also in expanding electrification. But this was done with tremendous amount of help from the central government and also local government. Those incentives are huge for basically setting up mass manufacturing of plant and all that. The incentive that the U.S. give is mostly just until recently. It's in the past it's mostly research and development. But the IRA, for example, legislation can provide some cash. 50% of investment can be granted by the government, but it's a little too late. I think it's good. It's important because the market of electric vehicle is maybe the second largest is the United States. So I can see like in Japan. Japan used to be an electronic, hub of the world. And because of that, all companies like Sony or Panasonic, companies that supply batteries or materials, they sit nearby these big customers. I can see maybe foreigner companies coming and investing in U.S. to supply, to meet the supply chain and allow for battery to be made in US. And I think some of them are like Koreans, possibly Chinese as well in the future. You know, people go where there is business, obviously. So if there is no regulation that can prevent the Chinese from coming to the US, that I expect they will have to come if they want to grow, or maybe Europe or Korea, for instance. Yeah, so you will see that. Yeah,
okay.
That's the only way to achieve the cost that can be acceptable to the consumer to buy.
So it's interesting. You said from $140 per kilowatt to 70, and 70 is a magic number,
Yes.
where it's a break even. I guess between the electric and the gasoline.
Yes.
And when that happens, it's game over.
Yeah.
So did you say, like, approximately what is the time frame for that to happen?
The target is by 2030, 2035, I guess. That's why you see some of the countries are putting date now on banning the production of conventional cars. I think in Europe, even India has put in a date, 2040. I think China is 2050 will be complete transformation. I'm not sure about the US, but yes, if we can get into 70, and I'm very confident, as I told you, the battery technology is very, very versatile. So it's not like one system like lead acid battery or nickel cadmium battery or nickel metal hydride battery. It's just one system. You make a little tweak here and there and doping here and there. But lithium ion has different cathode. For example, now we use the two main cathode, the LFP, which is invented by Professor Goodenough, that died recently. He actually a Nobel Prize winner. Yeah. And the other one is one that invested at Argon, the NMC, the nickel, and that one has higher energy. That's why there was a quick shift to this material. So because it does have high energy, and that can allow you to go longer or to reduce the cost. But there are technologies also to increase the energy from the anode side. As of now, graphite has been used, carbon or graphite has been used for the last 30 years. In lithium ion, it didn't change. But there is silicon. Silicon is dirt cheap, is sand, and it can give you up to, practically up to 4 times the capacity of graphite. So and there is a lot of work going on by the industry and also by the national lab and university trying to figure out a way to enable this material. If we do that, then you move to 450 from 300, and that could put the price at 70 if you do that. If you go to 450 watt-hour per kg, then you should be able to achieve that $70 per kilowatt-hour. So it's not that far, to be honest with you. I think I can see maybe a date of between 2030, 2035. We should be able to see the technology.
This is powerful.
Yes.
Because right now in Kuwait, I mean, you look at, the cars on the streets, 99%, I would say, maybe even more, is gasoline-based cars.
To be honest with
so
you.
You're thinking, like 10 years from now. This is 10 years from now.
Yeah.
And the whole thing in the whole world might shift, from gasoline-based to electric-based cars.
I would say that the developed country will be first, because not only if you have affordable car, you still need the infrastructure for charging. And that's a huge amount of money. You need to do that. To be honest with you, Kuwait is a perfect place it's a small country. I mean, superficie-wise. You can basically, if the government can put incentives, it's actually a great experimental, area to basically make mostly electric vehicle, because, now you can have an 800 kilometer range, which is maybe you can drive, I don't know the superficie of Kuwait, but from the north to the south, maybe
400
kilometers. So you can go and come back. So it's make it actually much more, practical. But you really have also to put, instead of having gas station now, you have to have charging station. So for developing or underdeveloping country, tremendous amount of money to make those everywhere, to connect them everywhere. So I wouldn't say by 2035 everything will become electric vehicle in the world, but at least you will see a big transition in China, in Europe, definitely, and to some extent in the United States as well. And then little by little, you'll see maybe more countries coming up because they have to have the infrastructure for charging.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you touched on in our conversation that, in a right now, barrel of oil, say you have about 85% of it would go to energy and energy consumption. So what do you think, in 2035, from a barrel of oil, what do you think, the energy use in the world would be, for one barrel of oil? Would you be able to give me a prediction?
Oh, Jay, well, I would say that, as I told you, at least in the United States, 85% of oil is used for transportation, different type of and 75%, sorry. And out of that 75%, 85% is used for on-road vehicle. So if you make complete transition to electric vehicle, there is tremendous drop in the need for oil. And, the cost of the oil is demand and supply. So the expectation is very difficult for me to predict a defined number. But the expectation is the cost of oil will drop significantly because now 75% of that will be basically gone, except if there are new application for oil, because oil is used for plastic industry, for polymer industry, for a lot of things, but mostly used for transportation, mostly. Yeah. So I think the cost of oil will drop. The question is how down. I have no idea, because also there are a lot of political things that come to play and so on. So it's difficult to predict, but definitely if it's if I have to predict, it will drop significantly.
I've read some of the papers. I skimmed through, to be honest with you, because a lot of it is not exactly in my field, but I do understand what you're doing. Something caught my eye, which you do, which is, a lot of numerical calculations. And I'm wondering right now, are you using this numerical calculations modeling for trying to come up with new material or to explain, the behavior of what you get in the lab?
Yeah. So in our case, most of the modeling we use is mostly to explain phenomena, to be honest with you, because to invent a new material, you don't even know its property. It's very difficult to put the inputs that you need to. So we, for example, if we know the great things about Argonne is an institution that has some very powerful tools of characterization and diagnostics, like the advanced photon source, just been updated at almost $900 million, upgraded, sorry. And so it can actually allow you to integrate materials during operation, which is very unique. And therefore you get some information about changes in structures or some properties, but sometimes you can't understand why. But then you couple that with some advanced modeling capability where you put some input, and then it will tell you, for example, the energetics of this reaction is possible because the barriers are very low, for example, and so on. So those are very, very, very important. So now I think there is a lot of effort using AI and machine learning, by scanning over all the materials that have been invented so far. There are hundreds of millions of that, and basically learn from that and maybe predict some materials that can give you certain properties that you need. Would it happen? Remain to be seen, but I'm pretty sure in the future maybe this type of concept will be used to design new materials.
For example, when you touched on those batteries, lithium LFP, lithium iron, phosphate?
Phosphate, yeah.
Okay, and then your invention, which is nickel manganese cobalt.
Yes.
Okay, and that was in argon,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
How is that process, to shift from elements that are entirely different from the other ones, and yet are you just circling through the periodic table and finding combinations, or what do you do?
Yeah. So basically, the first material that was put in cell phone was lithium cobalt oxide.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The problem is cobalt is very expensive, and that's the reason why we could not make it in electric vehicle. But then, so we know at least there is a structure that can accommodate, lithium at higher energy. So we start looking at different elements that are much cheaper, that are having certain properties very close to cobalt, and nickel and manganese is one of them. So obviously we have to add cobalt because cobalt can give you conductivity. It's a must, and so this is how we focus on a structure and we develop a system that is more sustainable than lithium cobalt oxide, and that's how we end up inventing this material. Basically, it has the voltage profile is slightly different from cobalt oxide, but and also it gives you much more capacity than cobalt oxide. Almost, cobalt oxide give you 150 milliampere per gram.
Okay.
We get almost 200, 220. So, and you get some sustainability and low cost because you are using mostly nickel and some manganese and some cobalt. So it's become actually the best solution to at least push the electrification in the right direction. Now, even I think the best material that is used by the industry now is 20% cobalt, 20% manganese, and 60% nickel. There is a kind of an effort to move to 10% cobalt. And the technology we invented almost 6 months ago, called a dual mode gradient, we can put 1% cobalt now.
Okay.
And we can get huge capacity, like 240. So this material, very likely you will see it in the next generation electric vehicle. Yeah.
Okay.
So and eventually, to be honest with you, eventually nickel will become a concern. When we have a lot of electric vehicle in the market, the cost of nickel will goes up, or at least at the moment now it's not that cheap. So we have to shift our direction to sustainable material that has the energy. LFP is one of them because it's made of iron and phosphate. They are very cheap both, but the energy is very low. The voltage is 3.5 volt, the capacity is 150, so the overall volumetric energy, and also the density is low because you have to make it at the nano phase because it's insulating. It's not electrically conductive. So those are the disadvantage of this material.
Okay.
So, and therefore, the NMC was an opportunity to attract companies to use it because they can make longer range or they can reduce the cost.
Okay. There was certainly a revolution that went around the world when the semiconductor industry around 1940 or 1950 when things started to become more mainstream, where the computational abilities and things like that, and how those things are made, the semiconductor itself, and how it is made, and how you can control, then smaller and smaller elements within your structure, And I've read things about, the semiconductor industry, which was fascinating, There are a lot of battles, and, ownership of abilities to create semiconductors in the world, and it really, determines which countries are the more powerful ones, missiles and missile, targeting and things like that. It is all
because of that.
Computational, and you see countries which are more powerful than others because of that. It's interesting because it feels to me like they touch on similar subject in the fact that fabrication-wise, you have to have control
Yes.
of small scale. Can you touch on that?
Yeah. So basically, for semiconductors, the control has to be almost perfect, because even impurities are not allowed. In the battery, I think you can see the control is very important to get the right material with the right structure, with the right density, the right particle size. For example, if you look at the Japanese, for cell phones, they were better than the Korean and Chinese because they have that control, because they started early. So you have to have that. In electric vehicle is very important, because the battery for consumer electronic is only 2-3 years. The electric vehicle is 15 years. So you have to have that, and you have to figure out technologies that can basically protect the interface, because that's where the reactivity happen between the electrolyte and the electrode, charged electrode, especially at the interface. So yes, not at the same extent as and also the other things, the manufacturing of the battery. So it has to be well controlled. If you have like wobbling, or if you have like cathode and anode that are not aligned, then when you're charging, the lithium coming from the cathode will deposit as lithium metal, and that's very dangerous. That will affect the performance, but also the safety. So there is a certain control. That's why some batteries, they have the same chemistry, but one lasts longer and safer than the other one, because the quality control is not as good. So yes, it is very important. And for lithium ion, there are many steps. There are almost 20 steps of manufacturing the cell, and you get into the pack level as well, the module and the pack level. So it's a lengthy process that need to have very, very key controls. For example, for looking at the alignment inside the cell, when you do the stacking, they use X-ray, so they can see if there is any disalignment and so on. And so it's a lot of heavy investment in the manufacturing and technology as well. Yeah.
Can we switch gears,
Yes.
please? So one of the things that we are interested in academia is excelling and publications. I was really impressed by your productivity. 600 plus publications, H index of 160, 170. This is for me, it is something like superhuman, almost. How is it that you can achieve it? Is it mainly group work?
Yeah,
And
well,
this is
it's
where
in my
what you-
group. Yeah, it's we mostly in my group. We have a large group, and this area is, as I said, is very, very hot. So we get a lot of funding from the Department of Energy and also the Department of Defense. So we have a lot of people working on different. Now the unique things in my team and myself, if you look, for example, at people working on battery, they focus on one area. Let's see, cathode, and within the cathode, one area within the cathode, and that's their life. In my case, I work on all kind of cathode. I work on all kind of electrolyte, all kind of additives to stabilize the interface, solid state, and also beyond lithium ion, like sulfur system, sodium. So we just initiated a new consortium that set by the Department of Energy. Is a $10 million consortium to work on sodium ion, because sodium could be the sustainable system. It's sodium, and the element that work with sodium is manganese and iron and titanium. So I set it up. I work with the Department of Energy to set it up, and also on the next generation lithium air or lithium superoxide. So you can see when you have like 10 different area, you'll be more productive than you have one area, because I always say to my people, especially the young people, you should work on different area, not within the battery in your career, because if in my case I work on fluorine chemistry, on carbon chemistry, on intercalation chemistry, on superconducting, I work on fuel cell, I work on catalyst, and this gives you an opportunity to take one area, one idea from here and apply it to another, and be more innovative, for example. Yeah. So because of that, of course, we publish about maybe 80, 90 papers. As a matter of fact, number of paper that was little loads. I think we have almost 800 paper now. Yeah, as of last month. Yeah. So
Impressive.
the other thing that is really important, and we do have a lot of high impact paper. The reason is, and this is an advice for the scientists as well that are listening. You innovate something. A lot of paper, you come up with a material, you do the testing, and you publish. It's not interesting. You never get it in a Science or Nature. But if you invent something and then deploy very powerful technique to understand, of course you put the result of testing, and then you couple the understanding using some advanced modeling. That's a Science or Nature paper. They like that very much because there is a big science, there is the innovation, and then you expose new techniques that the world can learn from. So these are things that we do, and I think we are very fortunate because we work in one of the premier national lab in the world, actually.
Okay, if you have an advice to Kuwait to get into, the battery research, what would your advice be? Where to start? How to start? And
well, I think I was just thinking. We work on a very interesting system. It's based on sulfur. Sulfur has twice the energy, at least gravimetrically, to lead the state-of-the-art lithium ion. And sulfur is at the moment dirt cheap. It's about $110 a ton. So I think. Now in Kuwait is one of the biggest producer of oil, and guess what? Sulfur is the byproduct of petroleum processing. Yes. So I'm pretty sure there are mountains of yellow cake of sulfur in Kuwait. I think could be a good opportunity to get into this system, and you can add value, using plenty of reserve that you have here. But if you want to start battery research, obviously. I think, and that's something that can be done. We need at the university level to create a curriculum on electrochemistry first, so people can learn about the different battery, the concept of the battery, and then the second is maybe to collaborate with an institution that is working on this, sending some of the people to learn, how they make battery, what are the, get interacted with the expert, and eventually maybe come back here. You learn the techniques, you learn the equipment, and come back and set it up here. I think this could be a faster way to get into this very, very, very important area. Unfortunately, not too many Arabic countries are. Morocco is doing very well in this area. So, but Kuwait could be a good place to do. And of course, it's an invitation if you have some very bright kids who want to learn this. I'm very welcome to have them come and join and learn from us.
Great. I mean, you mentioned in Argonne, it is truly an international institution in a matter of way.
Yes.
Because you invite people from all over the world, not only United States, right?
Yes, we have people from many different countries. We have a program for students, summer students, where they can come also and learn. These are all opportunities.
Professor Khaleil, it's really a pleasure meeting you. Pleasure having you in Kuwait. We are truly honored to have you, and I look forward to talk to you more.
Absolutely.
About your research.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I want to thank also the Kuwait Foundation for Advanced Science for hosting us here, and for all the things they did to make our trip very, very smooth and enjoyable. Thank you very much.
Thank you.